Next up is Riki Banerjee, Chief Technology Officer at Synchron. We've been talking about what's coming next for computing, and it's hard to think of a more futuristic computing technology than the idea of controlling devices via our thoughts rather than our hands or our voices. And that's exactly what brain-computer interfaces aim to do. They capture the intention behind our thoughts and translate them into commands on digital devices and computers. It's a nascent field, but one that's developing quickly with a massive potential impact for anyone with limited mobility. Our guest, Riki Banerjee, has spent her career designing and testing devices like this. She's leading the charge on a type of brain computer interface that can be placed in patients without the need for open brain surgery. Instead, it is inserted to the brain's blood vessels, where it helps transmit signals to a small computer placed on the patient's chest. Riki, welcome to EmTech. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, it is an honor and pleasure to be here today to talk to you about what we're doing at Synchron. So, there are 8 million people in the US that have different forms of paralysis. And for 400,000 people, it's severe and there's no treatment out there. Now, you can think about paralysis in a lot of different ways. It can come about because of a severe stroke, a spinal cord injury. It can be a degenerative disorder like ALS, where you're losing the ability over time to speak, to use your hands, to move your arms. And the challenge with this, as we're in a technology conference and we're talking a lot about AI, but what does this mean for you if you can't connect to the tools that connect us to the world, right? You lose that ability to connect in the way that so many of us are connecting, not just with each other, but also with our environments, right? So don't forget that the way you control your thermostat, the way that you maintain security, all of that may be through a portal of your devices. So we see this as a compelling area to enable people to restore connection with their world. This can happen. A lot of conditions create a paralysis so that you can't articulate or move your fingers. This can happen because you can't move your arm or your shoulder. But if you have those functions intact in your brain, then we're trying to tap into that to enable connection. So, why are brain procedures not so common? So, the challenge is getting access to your brain. So, these signals are attenuated severely by your skull, which is great because we can't walk around and hear each other's thoughts. But when you're trying to treat a condition, getting access to the brain is pretty scary and very specialized. So, there are a few, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 neurosurgeons that can do these types of procedures. There are procedures that are approved and shown efficacious for treatment of Parkinson's, epilepsy, tremor, obsessive compulsive disorder. But doing brain surgery is scary, and that remains a barrier to enabling this for a lot of people. Um, our approach is to come in through the blood vessel. And what this animation is showing is a catheter that's coming up through a major blood vessel that's right on top of the brain. And then the catheter is unveiling a device. And the device is a self expanding nitinol material that's typically used in stents. So, this is a stent like device that has electrodes on it. And then it's connected to a wire or a lead that's coming down that blood vessel into a device in the chest. This is all happening under the skin, and then you can communicate with that device wirelessly to extract those signals and then decode them and understand what's going on. So, how do you decode them? So, it's coming now straight from someone's brain and then being able to interact with a device. And now you kind of get into that algorithm space of how you decode them and how you understand these signals. Our first mission is to build this brain implant that will help restore this independence and is accessible to millions. The system, as I had mentioned, is that neural interface, which is we call the stentrode. So it's a stent-like device with electrodes on it, which is detecting the brain signals, connected to that transceiver that's underneath the skin in the chest area. And that's transmitting these signals to a decoder that's sitting on the table, which is where our algorithms work is done. And then that's translating it to different types of devices and connect to a digital ecosystem that you or I may use. We have active clinical trials ongoing. This is one of our research participants who has the system implanted. And he's using the system to move this dot up and down on the scale. And he can control the level at which he's trying to hit that target. So he's doing some training exercises so that he can kind of learn. People have described this as being similar to learning how to ride a bicycle. This is one of our research participants, and he also has a system implanted. He has ALS, and he has very limited mobility left, but he is able to communicate how he's feeling on a pain score. So he's interfacing with an Apple iPhone and their accessibility technology. And through that, he's able to communicate his pain score. And he has one residual movement left in his cheek. And so you can see at the end of that, he's communicating via a smile his satisfaction with being able to do that. We're building upon a framework of occupational therapy and physical therapy. So you may be familiar with this when talking about activities of daily living or instrumental activities of daily living. And we've transformed this into a digital domain. So if you can communicate, if you can manage your own finances, if you can manage your own shopping, these things enable you to have functional independence. And it's this framework that we're building upon to build a mechanism of clinical meaningfulness. So I'm in a very regulated environment. This is an implant. And so we have to demonstrate to the FDA, how is this providing clinically meaningful benefit? And so we're building upon this occupational therapy framework to demonstrate that. Where are we at now? So in 2019, we started our first trial in Australia. There were 4 participants in that trial, and they demonstrated that this technology was safe and that they could use it, and it was showing significant promise. With this promise, then we applied for FDA approval and received that to start an investigational trial in the US in 2022 that commenced. And actually, just yesterday was the publication of the results of that. So it was presented at the Congress of Neurosurgery and demonstrated that we had a responder rate of 80% and that the technology is showing great promise in terms of being safe. And then we're looking forward in 2025 to start a new clinical trial, and we've been developing a new system that's more commercially viable. So in this area, it's really hard to understand how someone's going to interact with the device and what they want to do with the device until you can start to implant. And so you get those first real voice of customers and understanding of user needs as we have our first patients that are implanted with the system. And this information has been funneled forward and has informed our next generation system. So what is our tech stack look like and how are we approaching this? In the early days, the system was built out of University of Melbourne, and it was a group of scientists that were working with us. And so they developed a framework that was fairly local and required their manual intervention and able to develop algorithms. However, as we get more patients, we need to look towards scalability. We'll still keep what's in the implanted transceiver fairly limited, and the reason to do that is because if something goes wrong there, that could require a surgery. So we'll architect this with intention to keep some of those key elements while we're learning outside of the body. The decoder system will have some enable some abilities locally, but a lot of our work will be done in the cloud. But we're looking forward to what that framework can look like in the future. We want to make sure that we're thinking about scalability, but also very much reliability. It could be a very frustrating user experience if you're thinking about something, but you have this delay, for example, as things appear on the screen. Of course, that could be very frustrating. So we want to make sure we have consistency, reliability as we scale. And then we anticipate that we can improve performance ongoing and bring that computing closer to the patient and individual. We also are looking forward to the stentrode-like device can offer other opportunities to deploy devices in the blood vessels for other conditions. And this may offer different kinds of technical architectures that enable for faster computing. We look forward to something called native BCI, where this feels very seamless for the individual and enables them to communicate in a seamless fashion. This has been a really rewarding journey. This is one of our research participants that has this implant, and you can just see the emotional journey that they're on our field clinical team member, is cheering him along as they get connection to the device. And this often is a window for them to contribute back as part of our research, but also towards the journey of restoring their independence and enabling new opportunities for them to communicate and engage in the domains that we all participate in today as able-bodied individuals. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Want to have a seat? And once again, anybody with questions in the room, just hold your hand up and we'll get a microphone over to you. Just give me 1 second. And anybody online as well, just submit those. Um, I wanted to hear what your participants' sort of first impressions are when they have this device, because I think for many of us who are able to use our phones quickly throughout the day, we might not even think about the connection that offers us to, the world, as you said in your presentation. So what are some of the use cases that they feel most empowered by now that they have this device?
A lot of the participants in our studies have ALS, so they're experiencing a disorder where they're degenerating. So over time, they're losing the ability to operate their hands. To their speech is becoming garbled. So they are definitely aware that over time, that it's called locked-in syndrome. That over time they will become locked in. And so for them, this is just like a lifeline, right? It's a window to the world. Like the quote that just resonates is our first participant, I think, was like, I'll always be able to tell my wife I love her, right? So it's that kind of fundamental basic need that this can offer.
Mm. And let's go to question in the audience. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dolly Cheetah. Fascinating work, actually. My question to you is there any, do you see any non invasive technology for future wherein you can accomplish the same outcome without the invasiveness that's involved in the process? Because I could foresee some complications, but I would like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the challenge has been that the skull is kind of in the way, I guess. It's from a signal processing perspective, your skull is attenuating that signal, and so you can't get enough information for the types of things that we're trying to do. Now, there are a lot of non-invasive solutions. There are consumer solutions, so there are meditation applications, there are aspects of brainwaves that you can get, and people are developing systems and tools for those of us in our everyday lives currently. But if you want to get to that next level of signal information, you have to go underneath the skull.
And just as a follow-up to that, it does seem like Synchron's approach is considered pretty minimally invasive as far as the industry goes, right? So how invasive is minimally invasive? What actually does it take to get your device in there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is coming in through the base of through your jugular vein at the base of the neck. So there's a puncture that's done here, but then the device is just introduced through there. So I guess compared to the other picture that I showed where you're coming in from the outside and you're doing what's called a craniotomy and then getting access to that tissue and the concern there, is you're exposing that tissue and more concerned about infection, et cetera. This is much less invasive, I guess, and so we use the word minimally invasive because you're coming in through here through a puncture. So it's much more amenable, I think, in this approach.
And what's the recovery like? Like, walk us through the first week or 2 weeks after somebody has this.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward recovery. I think probably just the challenge we have is working with severely paralyzed people. They don't, maybe heal in the way that you or I heal. They're less mobile in general. So there are aspects like that with the population that we're working with, but it's just in terms of the injury that we're introducing, I guess, and putting and implanting this device, it's pretty minimal compared to like doing a brain surgery.
And something I've always been curious about with these devices is what's required on the hardware side of things. Like, can they jump in and use an iPad or a phone in the same, like, without any changes to that device?
Yeah, so definitely I think we want to consider the needs of these patients and interface more, I would say, with the ecosystem of accessibility. I think that's just going to be a better experience for this population, but it's such a robust area of innovation and technology, the tools that are being released for many different needs. So we are talking to a lot of these companies, working directly with them. And I think it's going to vary. Like if as we work on neurodegenerative conditions, right? People are going to be at different places in their journey. So having that adaptability and being able to work with the world of tech as tech and walk alongside of tech, I think will be really valuable.
Let's go to a question in the back.
Hi, my name's Eugenia Hu. I was wondering, I'm assuming that a large portion of what you're doing is collecting data on these different, the people that are running through the trials. Have you found any differentiation between like people that are patients that are suffering different disorders, and how has that impacted like your like long-term product roadmap?
Yeah, that's something that we'll continue to study. I mean, I think with 10 participants, we have a pretty low number of people to be able to study something like that. I think even as I mentioned, if you're working with someone with ALS, there's a disease progression happening. So even a single participant is changing over time, and that's a area of robust research study even beyond Synchron in terms of what's actually happening there, as someone's condition is changing, you know physically, is their brain changing, um in terms of what capability remains there as well. Those are robust areas of research.
And anybody else in the room, just go ahead and hold your hand up if you have a question. I think there's one in the back over there. While the microphone's getting over there, just curious if you could say more about the FDA process of all of this. I mean, we can assume the FDA is prioritizing safety in these devices, but a little more nuance there. What are they looking into, and what sort of regulatory hurdles are you coming across?
Yeah, the FDA leadership has been along the journey with us. So there is a brain-computer interface working group, and they sit there with us, and they're grappling with these questions with us. So I mentioned, defining what clinical meaningful benefit is, and then clinical meaningful benefit gets you to maybe an FDA approval, but the journey of not to get too deep into healthcare stuff, but reimbursement is also a thing in this area, right? So, and that's like a whole nother organization. So we're working closely with the FDA and navigating. These are big things that we're going to have to figure out. This is kind of a first of world type thing in that
Mm.
respect.
Go to a question in the back.
Oh, Ricky, thanks a lot. My phone tells me today that I've been on it 8 hours, and that doesn't even include my PC. So I'm able-bodied, but I'm also seeking a new autonomy. So the question is, when do the rest of us get this technology? And are you on that pathway? Thanks.
I was going to ask you the same thing. That's great, Antonio.
It's a long journey to and it's a different profile, I think, to give someone able-bodied, augmentation, I'll say, versus someone who's severely disabled, right? So, I think that there's a benefit in the Synchron approach being less invasive. That seems like it has a viability to walk that journey towards something like LASIK, where some of us that are able-bodied would consider doing something like that. But to get to that level of utility, to sensor quality, to stability in the device, and meet the needs of someone able-bodied is still quite a long journey.
You probably don't bring that up to the FDA often.
Yeah, no.
What are some other ethical sort of quandaries or implications you have to think about in this sort of work?
So we take security really seriously. There is a whole area of cybersecurity that the FDA is actually quite savvy to when you have an implantable device. I came from working on implantable devices that have electronics in them, and so that's something we take really seriously and work with experts to have really really strong data security and privacy.
And once someone has the device, what sort of, for lack of a better word, like maintenance has to be done, right? Like I assume it's not a set it and forget it and it just keeps working. What has to be done once it's in?
Yeah, and these are things that we're developing, right? Like we want someone to be able to onboard into the system largely on their own. The history of BCI is exciting, but a lot of researcher time working with someone on a one-on-one basis. To do one task might be a lot of training and a lot of researcher time. And so because we're in this space where we want to develop a product and deploy it across people of different capabilities, different disorders and conditions, we are really focused on how do we onboard someone into the system really quickly. And then maintenance ongoing, might be, if iOS updates, that's just something that we have to consider and make sure that our tools and systems are working and up and running, and that we can still enable functionality for our customers.
And there aren't that many household names for brain-computer interfaces out there, but one of them is, of course, Neuralink. And I'm wondering what it's like sharing the space with that company and
Yeah,
with Elon, to the
I've
extent that you want to say.
never had anything like this in my career. The benefit of it is it's brought a lot of shined a light on the space. There's now media where I can share with my family, and they know what I do, which has never happened in my career. So in some ways, he brings a lot of excitement, and it's brought funding into the space, potential. I think there's that kind of aspect of it that's been rewarding. You know, I think a lot of people think medical technology is really slow. I came from Medtronic. That's where my background is from, and I think there's kind of a feeling, well, it's really slow. But I see with Neuralink, when someone seems to have like unlimited deep pockets, and like it's potentially paradigm shifting. I think in terms of how things are done, and we just I never had unlimited deep pockets. I never had unlimited time working in a company, and so when I see how long it takes at Neuralink, and how much money it takes, I'm like, yeah, that's about right. But we never had those kind of lack
Mm.
of barriers or limitations. So yeah, in some ways it can be a very exciting time. Like he brings a different, he's definitely paradigm shifting.
Yeah, and I think like quantum computing, you work in a field where people will always be pressing on, when is it happening? When's the next trial?
Yeah.
When's the next update? Has the presence of Neuralink sort of like, changed the expectation from the field on how quickly you can deliver some of these devices?
It's going to be a long journey,
Yeah.
for them as well as for us. But I will say, like I mentioned, the FDA is working with us, and this is a space. You asked what kind of maintenance will it take? Like we'll have to be more agile to like software changing. We're interfacing with tech. Tech moves fast. So how do you architect that system so you can enable that speed and that compelling experience? And I think, along with Neuralink, like we'll be pushing the boundaries of the pace that the FTA might like to move at. And they're also, I know that they're figuring out ways that they can be along with us and change their processes to move more quickly too. So yeah. Yep.
Can you share an example of something you've learned from the patients who have it currently, and maybe an adaptation that you've made or a course adjustment you've had to make given some of those trials?
Yeah, I think that it's for those of us that are able-bodied, we might see that and think about the devastation of learning you have some kind of diagnosis like that, and we might presume that it's a very depressing situation, I guess. And I think in working with the patients, learning about what motivates them and what their life is really like, I think has been really rewarding. Like, I think there have been studies done showing that, um, over time they adapt and they find what's rewarding in their lives. And actually, being a part of these kinds of research studies sometimes is very rewarding for them. Like, I am intentionally using the word research participant instead of patient. They are participants and they are now contributing actively to the field, and their experience is very valuable to what we're learning. So that partnership and understanding their lives more holistically instead of like seeing them as patients or seeing them as someone to be maybe pitied has definitely a journey that I've appreciated. And
Mm.
yeah.
And as we close in the minute or so we have left, what sort of ailments or diseases are on the horizon for you that you can't currently treat with these sort of devices now, but you're looking ahead to treating in the future?
Yeah, so even in the space of paralysis, we definitely want our next generation system to show more capability so we can help people maybe that have less severe paralysis. So there'll even be a journey just on paralysis. But then you can envision that this device could go to other areas of the brain and you could treat someone that has epilepsy, for example. If you could get into deeper areas in the brain, could you treat Parkinson's disease with stimulation, other types of conditions that people are looking at in the brain. Can you access them through the blood vessels?
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for, but glad you could join us.
Great, thanks.